Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. For today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make this simple stylish elastic off-shoulder top with elastic puffy sleeves. This tutorial is very beginner friendly and is part of our beginner series here on YouTube. So if you've not been following, I have a playlist created just for that. You can go through it on my channel. So if this is your first time on this channel, I hope you'll stick around and enjoy it, and also kindly click on the subscribe button. To the existing subscribers, you guys are the real G's. Thank you for the love, support, shares and comments. If this is something you'll be interested in, kindly stick around and watch to the end and leave a comment if you found it helpful. Thank you. So let's dive right into the tutorial. The first thing I'll be showing you how to do is how to take your measurements. So here I'm just taking the measurement of the length of the fabric, which is 60 inches. The length of the fabric is the part that remains the same throughout the entire fabric. Next is to measure the width of the fabric, and what I have here is 36 inches, which is 1 yard of fabric. The width is the part of the fabric with this fancy edge. Next, I'll be folding my fabric along the 60 inches length. So this top is going to be very free, very loose. Basically working with a size 14 measurement. When I fold once, I'll get 30 on both sides. And now I want you to watch carefully how I'll fold the rest of the fabric. If you notice, I started folding with the right side of the fabric and eventually was able to turn it into the wrong side of the fabric. In this way, I'll be able to cut both the front piece and the back piece together. So remember, I folded it by the 60 inches length, and so you have 15 on our tape measure and it's 4 places, which is 60. Now I'll be explaining the off-shoulder cutting. For a normal top, we'll place the tip of our tape rule to the top of our fabric. So for instance, if our neck depth is 6 inches, from the top of our fabric we'll just mark 6 inches or 4 inches or 5 inches, whatever depth we're working with. But since this is an off-shoulder top, we're not having a shoulder, we would select the neck depth we want to work with, which is typically 4 to 6 or 7 or 8 inches depth. For this tutorial, I'm working with a depth of 5 inches. So I will place the number 4 mark on the top of my fabric because of 1 inch folding allowance at the top. So when I fold in 1 inch, I'll get 5 inch neck depth. Next, I'm marking my blouse length, 26 inches. You can make yours longer or shorter and add your folding allowance. From my off-shoulder depth now, I'll mark my bust line and waistline. On the bust line, I'll go up 2 inches for the armhole depth, also known as chest line. Next is to measure how wide our off shoulder will be. Now this depends on your fabric and how wide you actually want it to be. In this case, I'm working with limited fabric. Please note that the wider you make your off shoulder, the fuller your top is. I typically like to use around 9 to 12 inches if I'm working with elastic. If you're not working with elastic, you measure the off shoulder of the person and divide by 4 and place on your fabric. Next thing I'll be showing you is how to do your armhole curve for your off shoulder. You typically just do it the same way you do your normal top. You can do it that way, or another way I really like to do it is just to give it a V slant rather than the typical slant we're used to. So I just connect it from the off shoulder point at the top of my fabric to the end of the armhole at the edge of my fabric. You would notice that while reshaping the armhole, I went in a little bit. So instead of 11 inches now, it became about 10 or 9.5 inches. Those are the two ways to shape your off-shoulder armhole. Next is to place the round body measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch on. This is a free top, so you can add as much as 2 to 3 inches to your actual measurement and divide by 4. I'm not taking waist measurement because I'll have an elastic on the waistline, so I'll just connect from the armhole to the chest line and to the length of my fabric. Since I'm cutting the front and back together, I'll just proceed to cut. After cutting, don't forget to notch your sides, the center front, the center back, your armhole, and every other necessary point to avoid confusion while sewing. I've gone ahead to separate my front and back piece together, and I want you to know that you can make different neck depths for your front and back piece of your off-shoulder top, but most times it's usually without elastic. In this case, you see that both front piece and back piece are literally the same, and you can wear it and style it however way you like it. Here I'm giving you a rough idea of what it will look like with the elastic at the top and the waistline before we head on to the sewing machine. So when you're about to put your elastic, you will fold the top part of your off shoulder. Now I don't want you to make the same mistake like I did. Before cutting, you should fold your allowance. You should fold your elastic allowance before you cut your off shoulder, so you do not have a lack of fabric on both sides. As you can see, when I fold my 1 inch elastic allowance, you see that the waistline and the armhole line balances itself out. Typically, before you cut your armhole, you're supposed to mark out your 1 inch folding allowance, or whatever inch allowance you take out on your top of your fabric. You mark it and then you fold it in before you cut your armhole. This is so that when you're sewing, it will not have that gap you can see on the armhole. To correct this is actually easy. I'll just reshape the armhole curve because this is an off shoulder with elastic, so I advise you to correct this beforehand. Next thing we'll be cutting with our leftover fabric is the sleeves. I don't have an exact sleeve measurement in mind because I'm working with the leftover fabric, but you can go ahead to decide on how full you want your sleeves to be. So I folded my fabric into two, one for each sleeves. The top of my sleeve is 14 inches wide. The trick I like to use for the off-shoulder sleeve is just to make sure it is wider than the person's normal round arm measurement. This person's round arm measurement is typically 15, so I'll just make it bigger. Instead of 7.5 inches that I would have normally used, because of the elastic, I'll mark 10 inches. For the armhole depth on the sleeve, I'll use 9 inches, which was the same thing we used on the bodice. Then I'll draw my armhole curve. You can do it however way you like of the two methods I showed you earlier. One trick to make sure you're on the right track is to take the armhole curve of the main top and check with the armhole curve of the sleeve. You can see that we have matching pieces, so we're on the right track. You can see the sleeve length we're working with is around 16 inches by the time we have our 1 inch allowance on the bottom. So since this is without pattern, normally this person's bottom round sleeve measurement would have been 12 inches divided by 2 would have given us 6 inches, and then would have connected it to the armhole curve. But since this is going to have elastic at the bottom part of the sleeves, we will just cut it straight. We'll just increase the width using your discretion. In my case, I'm working with 10 inch and 1 inch sewing allowance. You can even extend it to the end of your fabric. Just know that this will increase the fullness of your sleeves. I'll connect my sleeve length width to the armhole depth. At the top part of my sleeve, I'll fold the elastic allowance of 1 inch before I proceed to cut the armhole. This is what it should look like when you open it and when you fold your elastic allowance. You can see that there are no gaps. I've cut this into two pieces for both sleeves. Remember, for the waistline, I'll be using an elastic. So before I take it to my sewing machine, I would mark out the waistline on both sides and on both the front piece and the back piece. Remember, after cutting we notched the waistline, so I'll just connect from one point to another with a straight line, and you can use your fabric marker or a chalk. The waist width that we have on our fabric is around 27 inches. That means 27 times 2 is 54 inches for the waist measurement. An elastic will help us fit this waist measurement to the client's actual waist measurement. To cut the elastic, I'll measure half of what I have on my fabric. On my fabric, I have 27 inches. I'll measure half of 27 inches, which is around 13.5 inches. So my elastic will be 13.5 inches. When I stretch it, it would extend to 27 inches. When we head over to the sewing machine, I'll be showing you how to sew this to your fabric. I'll start off putting the elastic on the sleeve, and here I'm just showing you how to fold your elastic allowance. You take it to your sewing machine now and sew it with about 1/4 of an inch or half an inch, depending on the width of your elastic. This is what it should look like when you're done. Then you take it to your ironing table, and you press properly. We repeat the same process for the bottom part of the sleeve and then for the second sleeve. I have also folded the elastic allowance for the main top. For the off shoulder part, I will take an elastic band that is half of the measurement I have on my fabric. You should know that if at the end of the day your fabric turns out to be slightly bigger, then you can easily adjust the elastic band. A very important step I'll be showing you now is how to use a safety pin to pass your elastic band into your folding allowance. Just pay close attention to the following steps. With your pin attached to your elastic band, you take it through the opening of your off shoulder and pass it carefully and patiently so you do not release the pin from the elastic band. When the elastic band has gotten to the end of the opening, you can take it to your machine and stitch so it doesn't come off. We've successfully passed the elastic from one end to the other, so we'll take it to the machine and stitch the other end closed. I'll repeat the same process for the second piece. I've joined the front and the back pieces together with the allowance of 1 inch. I've also taken it to my ironing table to press all the allowances open. I've also joined the sleeve with the allowance we have, as you can see here. Next thing, I'll be showing you how to attach the sleeve to the blouse. I'll take the joining allowance of the sleeves and the joining allowance of the blouse and attach it with a pin. Then I'll connect the elastic allowance of both the sleeves and the blouse together with a pin as well, making sure that both pieces match and there are no excess fabric left. This is what it should look like after you're done pinning, before you take it to your sewing machine to join both pieces together. You repeat the same process for the other sleeve, securing it with pins before you take it to your sewing machine. I'm done stitching it with the sewing machine, and this is what it looks like. Very simple and fast. The beauty of this kind of off-shoulder top is the fact that you can wear both back and front without having to check which side is the back and front. And for the sleeves, you can adjust it to reach the top of your shoulders, and you can also wear it as an off-shoulder sleeve. If you've gotten to this point, I'm sure you got value from what you've seen so far. So if you haven't yet subscribed, kindly do so, and also share the video to as many others as you know would find this video useful and helpful. If you try out this project, kindly let me know in the comment section. Don't forget that the most active subscriber on this channel gets to pick our next tutorial for this month. This is to encourage you guys to stay active on here. And with that, we've come to the end of today's tutorial. I hope you find it useful. Thank you, and see you in our next tutorial. Bye bye.